Chapter 3. Cara. Cara's thoughts were still on Steve's death as she pulled into her spot in front of the bed and breakfast. Jordan had agreed to call in the death, but his tone had been filled with questions. She knew she would have to tell him everything soon. He deserved that courtesy anyway. Grabbing her laptop bag from the seat beside her, she locked the car and headed into the house. There was only one guest checked in currently, but it was nearing lunchtime, and she needed to prepare something for her, even if it was small. After dropping her bag on the counter, she turned to the fridge to grab fixings for sandwiches. Mustard, cheese, meat. Her hand had just touched the plastic package when pain like she'd never felt before shot through her head, and the world went dark. A soft moan escaped Cara's mouth as she struggled to open her eyes.
Cara, are you okay?
She tried to fight the cloud fogging her brain, but it was hard. Her head pounded like an incessant drummer, and everything felt fuzzy. Still, that had sounded like a man's voice, like Bubba's voice. What was he doing here? More importantly, why weren't her eyes cooperating as she tried to open them? Something had happened, but she couldn't quite remember what. It was there in the fog, but just out of reach. "This is Captain McKenna Drake of the Woodville Police?" A female voice she didn't recognize cut through the foggy haze. Certainly not Bubba's voice. It was too high. But who was McKenna Drake? Not her guest. No, her guest was an artsy elderly woman named Gladys, here to walk the beach and look for sand dollars. "I'm at Cara Hunter's bed and breakfast," the voice continued, "and she's been injured. Please send an ambo and a local unit to 212 Whistler Avenue."
What happened here?
Confusion and concern collided in Bubba's voice. "I have no idea." And then, like a curtain lifting before a play, the previous few minutes came back to Cara. Steve's death, setting her bag down, grabbing food for sandwiches, and something hitting her across the head. "I think I do. Can you help me up?" Cara's voice sounded strange and strangled in her head, but at least the fog was dissipating. Unfortunately, the clearing fog meant the throbbing pain in her head was increasing. "I don't know if we should move her until the ambulance gets here." There was that feminine voice again. Nonsense. Cara forced her eyes open and immediately blinked against the blinding light. She struggled to sit up herself. "I took a hit to the head, but I'm fine." Bubba's large hand gripped her arm, and he helped her to a sitting position so that her back leaned against the base of the bar.
"You're still getting looked at, Cara."
"Fine, they can look at me, but I'll be okay." She touched the back of her head and grimaced at the bumps she felt. She'd had worse, but this was definitely a good one. "I'm assuming there's no one still in the house?"
"We didn't see anyone."
Bubba's cautious words were followed with a glance at the brunette next to him that told Cara they hadn't yet checked. "But we didn't clear the house either. I'll do that now." As the woman stood, Cara finally placed who she was. McKenna Drake, the police officer from Woodville, whom Bubba had called her about a few days ago.
"Do you know what happened?"
Bubba's concerned gaze returned to Cara as McKenna pulled her gun and stepped out of the kitchen. "I know someone clocked me with something, but I didn't see them. I was getting lunch prepared for Gladys." Gladys! The woman's elderly face rose to her mind, and she tried to stand. "Is Gladys okay?" Bubba pushed her back down.
"McKenna and I will check on her. You are not to move until you get checked out." "So, you have no idea who attacked you?"
Cara chewed on her bottom lip. She may not know who, but she could guess it was the same person who had attacked Steve. "They must have been quiet because I heard nothing." She could not believe that someone had gotten the jump on her. With her military background, that shouldn't have happened, especially after she saw what happened with Steve. Her radar should have been on heavy alert. which meant not only had she been too distracted, but it had to have been someone with experience. But then, why leave her alive? Her eyes widened as she remembered she had left her laptop on the counter. Oh no, had they gotten her research too? No, please, God, no. It would be bad if they had Steve's, but if they had hers too? She needed to check, but she couldn't right now. Not with Bubba and Makenna still here. None of them knew of her work, and for their protection, she needed to keep it that way.
What's wrong?
Bubba must have noticed the change in her expression, because concern colored his normally deep, booming voice. Cara thought quickly. She couldn't share the truth with him, but what could she say? I was just thinking about Gladys. She's an elderly woman, and I would hate it if anything happened to her. Bubba narrowed his eyes at her, as if he didn't believe her. She couldn't blame him. That excuse had been lacking.
I promise Makenna will find out. You just need to rest and recover. Are you thinking it was a robbery?
Yeah, I can't imagine what else it would be. I'll have to check the safe later, and my room, though, to be sure. Makenna returned at that moment, but as her gun was back in her holster, Cara knew she had found nothing. The rest of the place is clean. Your guest in room 3 was taking a nap and heard nothing, so that's a dead end, too. I'm assuming the police will do a fingerprinting of the area when they arrive?
That we will,
Detective Jordan Graves said as he and his female partner Al stepped into the room. His eyes narrowed in concern when he caught Cara's gaze.
Are you okay?
Cara had known Jordan longer than the others, and she could tell his worry ran deep from the creases in his forehead and around his eyes. The fact that he knew about Steve only deepened his concern, but the last thing she needed was Jordan sticking to her like glue. That would certainly make it hard to finish her mission. I'm fine, Jordan. Someone got the jump on me, but it's just a little bump. Disbelief flickered in his eyes as his hand ran across his stubbled face. But he knew her well enough to know she would tell him what she could when she got a chance. He would have questions for her later, especially coupled with this morning's call, but hopefully he would save them until after she could check on her research and come up with a credible story. Okay, I love you guys, but can I get a little room to examine my patient here? Ivy's soft feminine voice carried through the kitchen. The group parted and Ivy squatted beside Cara. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a low ponytail today, emphasizing the heart shape of her face. How are you feeling? I'm okay, just a little dizzy. Ivy flashed a light in Cara's eyes and checked her pulse. Then she checked the bump on the back of her head. Well, there's a little blood back here, and since you were unconscious, I want to take you in for a head CT. It's probably nothing, but we don't mess around with head injuries. Cara wanted to object. She needed to see how much the person had gotten, but she knew it was futile. With the group surrounding her, there was no way they were going to let her skip a hospital visit. She would just have to hope the doctor would release her soon and she could come back to check on her work. All right, fine. Bubba, I put Makenna in room 5. The key is in the cabinet behind my desk.
Don't worry, Cara. I'll help get her set up, Jordan offered.
He knew the house almost as well as she did, from all the times he had brought her someone to house and protect. I'll even have him give me a rundown so I can cover the place while you're gone. A smile accompanied Makenna's words, and Cara could see why Bubba had fallen for her. Not only was she pretty, but here she was offering to help out a total stranger. Thank you. Cara had never needed extra help. The B&B was never that busy, and she did most of her research in the early morning and late evenings. But suddenly she wished she had trained someone on how to run the business. Makenna placed a hand on Cara's shoulder. I'm happy to help. I was worried I might be a little bored without my regular police duties, but this will be a nice way to keep me busy when Bubba's at work. The two exchanged a smile that made Cara's heart ache. Would she ever find someone who looked at her like that? And I'll get the crime lab out here to dust for fingerprints," Al said as she pulled her radio from her belt and stepped away. "See? Everything is under control, so it's time to get you loaded up." Ivy's smile was bright and encouraging, but Cara had a hard time returning it. If they knew what might be missing and what could happen if it fell into the wrong hands, they wouldn't be so glib. She just hoped that didn't happen.